What about the 5G and the Bluetooth?
I think like if you're living behind like a 5G tower, like that could be a problem. What red light is doing is actually it is donating photonic energy, so light energy, to your mitochondria itself. If you're using scope or Listerine every day, you're bludgeoning your nitric oxide supply. People don't realize that you make most of your nitric oxide from your mouth and from your nose. What psychedelics do is that they dampen down something called your default mode network. The short story is that if you're young, THC isn't a good idea. Yellow.
That's a good show.
He gets very upset when you say black, so be careful.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Blacks.
Is it too soon? I don't know.
You got to be careful.
I don't know.
Let's not have that on there. That shouldn't be the start of the podcast.
Oh, no. We don't need that.
Well, I get the Jewish thing all the time, so you know.
Are you?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. But you know, I don't identify with any particular religion anymore. So.
Gotcha.
Maybe I'm a Jew-boo. You ever hear that? That's a Jewish Buddhist. You know, that's
Is that a thing?
I've never heard of that.
No, well, some of the the big rash of people that went to India back in like the 1960s and 70s to learning about Hindu and Buddhist philosophy were actually Jewish people, like many Jews, and then they would call back and they'd come back and they call themselves Jew-boos or Boo-Jews. I think Jew-boos sounds better.
Jew-boo sounds better.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of people that I learned that I learned from, or I've learned from over the years that will identify as such. So.
Sick.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to dive in on some stuff you mentioned on our other podcast where you were talking a little bit about light, but I think that light is such an important thing that it's more important to get into.
Yeah.
And
sure.
When we were talking before the podcast, you were talking about how you think that a lot of things are going to kind of move to these technologies. We were talking about like a potential to expose people to like cold, hot, light. And you're like, I think there's going to be a lot more stuff kind of moving towards these frequencies and some of these different things.
Yeah.
What are you kind of seeing from the future?
Well, I have a friend of mine that likes to say, I see the future and it is vague. That's Dr. Ted, one of my colleagues that I work with. And so you never know, right? You never really know where things are going. I think that kind of where we are right now is in a place where we're looking at cellular medicine, what we talked about in our last podcast, talking about mitochondria and really understanding that optimizing at that level is actually very doable right now.
Yeah.
Because we have a good amount of tools, of technology to measure what's going on there and be able to say, okay, you did this. Now it looks like this after doing those kinds of things, whether it was light exposure, changing your diet, optimizing your vitamins and minerals and nutrients, you know, whatever it might be. But like, sort of beneath all of that, like beneath mitochondrial function is sort of the energetics of things. Like how are things working? This is the term in the field is called bioenergetics. This is the field of mitochondrial medicine, but looking at it more from an energy perspective and frequency
type stuff.
Perspective. Yeah. And so this is where, you know, things have been going on for a long time, talking about various types of ways of, you know, doing various things like going to energy centers around the world, man, or going and doing some frequency chanting and vibration and kind of that work and seeing how things change. That's where I think the future is going to be. I don't think it's going to be there in the next couple of years, but once we can start really kind of quantifying, and there's some really cool things that are happening. I was mentioning to you before we started recording, there's this one guy, his name is Michael Levin, that he's going to win the Nobel Prize at some point, but he's basically figured out that you can make new organs with just understanding the channels and the ions like sodium, calcium, potassium that's actually happening in a cell membrane, and then just basically being able to create something just knowing that, right?
Just sort of like maybe the way the body does it.
Exactly.
In the first place, right?
Exactly. So we think that the body is like maybe like a top down, or maybe it comes from the nucleus. We have DNA, and then the DNA tells us to do things, and it transcribes itself. But no, it actually seems to happen maybe even outside of that whole paradigm, you know? So the whole paradigm is shifting where we think everything comes from your genome. But no, maybe it's coming from these ion channels. Maybe it's coming from electric signals that are coming outside the body, or internal signals that are coming inside the body. Like one thing that kind of struck me a while ago, I don't know if you guys know this, but like if your heart was pumping as hard as it needed to pump to get all of your blood to all of your capillaries to all around your body, it'd be needed pumping like 10,000 times stronger than it is, right? Meaning because every pump of your heart is really, you know, it's pumping your major blood vessels, you know, your aorta, your
Doctor, your heart is not a pump.
You got it. Exactly. Yes. You know this work, right? But the idea is that what are these local factors that are causing blood to continue to flow, and other things to flow too? These are things like water and how water is structured. There are things like light exposure and how light affects water. And there's all this work that was done by a guy named Gerald Pollack looking at what's called the fourth phase of water, which you guys are familiar with, I think, right? And so this stuff is now just coming out as I mean, it's been understood for a while, but then how can you really use this in clinical practice? Like, that's where I think the sort of modern, cutting edge, like futuristic medicine is going to be. It's like, okay, I'm going to put a frequency on you and you're going to heal your organ. I'm going to put a frequency on you, I'm going to heal back, you're going to regrow a liver, right? That's the shit that's going to happen.
Get one of those bowls where you go, vroom, right? One of those things.
Tibetan singing bowls? Like that's what that is. Yeah. You can meditate at the same time while you're optimizing your biology, right? So we talk about everything's got like a biological signal, right? Or a signature, right? You have these other companies that are coming out with these supplements that are just energetic signatures of supplements and saying you take this energetic signature and that's all you need to do. You don't even take the supplement itself. There is something to that, probably.
Okay,
yeah,
so
but
real quick,
this is
guys,
really woo-woo. I know.
check out our episode with Wilma Wong, because Wilma talked about some of those supplements.
Oh, she did.
Even we were like,
And she
so
hooked us up to that computer and stuff too. That was weird. Yeah.
So please
Okay, so
keep
you guys have been on this weird level already, but this is, I think, where things are going. Where if you can understand the frequency, the vibration, the electromagnetic aspect of things, and then understand how you can program biology using that, like that is the future, but that's like not happening, tomorrow, right? So right now, what we know is that there are certain things that we can absolutely do that do work on that level, right? And certainly light is a big one of those things, and frequency is a big one of those too. And then thinking about how you're using those on a regular basis can be helpful, right? And so then you think about how your heart is pumping out certain electric signals, like how your brain is pumping out certain electric signals, and we can measure these already. We can look at an EEG, you can look at a cardiovascular, like an EKG as well, and you can kind of see, well, okay, what happens when I do these things? And you can see these sort of fields that are created outside them, or outside your body, right? And how they're interacting with all the other frequencies and vibrations all around you. So this gets into some, some interesting conceptual frameworks that kind of are out there. My favorite, can I go really out there and then we can kind of come back in, is something called the holographic universe. Have you guys heard of this before?
No.
So there's a book that was published probably in the 80s. I think it's Charles Bohm, Bohm, I think is his last name. He was a physicist. And the idea is that the world is holographic. And what that means is that, this is kind of trippy, but in any single point in the universe lies all the information of the universe in that point. Meaning that all that information is there. So because if it wasn't there, you would see blanks in your vision, because the idea is that all the light, everything that's coming into this single point in front of you contains everything that's in the universe around you. If it didn't contain something over here, then you wouldn't see something that was over there, right? Everything is there. So it's this idea of interference patterns and looking at various ways of interpreting them. It's kind of crazy. But the idea really is that have you ever seen the movie Everywhere All at Once kind of thing?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. The idea is that everything is happening all at the same time, every single moment, every single day. Time and space are a construct that don't really exist. Mm-hmm. And so then everything is available at any particular time. So there's a trippy stuff for you.
I got a question about red light. Have you seen red light in the people that you help? Because you do a lot of consulting with a lot of different people.
Yeah.
The people that you consult, do you see red light actually doing things to blood glucose levels?
So the funny thing is, when I first learned about red light, I was like, this isn't going to do anything. It's just red light. It just
feels like nothing.
It doesn't feel like much. What you find is what red light is doing is actually it is donating photonic energy, so light energy, to your mitochondria itself, to a very specific part of your mitochondria called the complex 4, or cytochrome oxidase, which is one of the proteins on the electron transport chain, which is the part of the mitochondria that helps you make energy. Okay. And so you notice when you're using the red light, you feel a little more energy, you feel a little more focus. And then your metabolism, which is sort of a construct that we call how well you can make energy and how well you can detox from the energy you make, how that ramps up, your capacity goes up. And when your capacity metabolically goes up, your capacity to maintain a better insulin level is also going to be higher, right? So that is something very cool about red light.
The red light is having an impact on what, the pancreas, or having an impact on the insulin or the
on the
efficiency?
mitochondria, on the efficiency of your cells to work, right?
Okay.
It's a cell.
And so it's maybe allowing the insulin to be more powerful, or
so it's more that you're
insulin sensitive?
Yes, exactly, insulin sensitive. So your body has the more capacity to utilize the glucose and make energy effectively from it, and then help your insulin levels as a result regulate better, right?
I also want to mention one thing. That's just an aside. Every time I get done with my device, and my device also has UVA and UVB, but every time I get done, I have a massive pump. Just by standing there. It doesn't matter. Morning, evening, I get off of it, I have a pump, which is just an odd, great phenomenon.
Maybe a little nitric oxide?
That's exactly what's happening. So in the mitochondria as well, along with your blood vascular wall, you're getting nitric oxide release. And as a result of that, you feel your blood vessels will dilate and you'll feel that pump a little bit as well. And so that's another big piece of what's happening inside of your mitochondria. And now, again, it's not like it's a panacea. It's not like it's going to cure everything. If you don't have enough capacity to make nitric oxide, for example, you're not going to do a great job with light. It's going to be okay, right? But most people don't realize that you make most of your nitric oxide from your mouth and from your nose. And so if you're like using scope or Listerine every day, you're bludgeoning so we actually make it from the bacteria in our mouth. And so if you're using like scope or Listerine every day, you're bludgeoning your nitric oxide supply. And so you don't want to do that. If you're
affecting the microbiome of the mouth, right?
And also like if you're using like toothpaste that have a lot of fluoride in them, for example, doing the same thing. So that's also
water with fluoride.
Yep. All that stuff, right? That's all going to bludgeon. It's like almost like a nuclear bomb for your mouth if you're having Listerine or scope or something like that on a regular basis. Also, if you don't have enough stomach acid as well, you need stomach acid to help actually activate the nitric oxide. So if you're taking like a Peptide or proton pump inhibitor like omeprazole or Prilosec, you're also bludgeoning your nitric oxide supply as well. And so if you have a lower nitric oxide supply, you have a higher risk of dying, right? Because you need it for cardiovascular function, for endovascular function, and for mitochondrial function, and also brain health. Like you have a lot of mitochondria, as we know, in our brain, and you have a lot of nitric oxide that's required there. And so it's like, I have a lot of friends that talk about nitric oxide till the cows come home because it's such an important compound. And it very much is. And if you're thinking, well, I'm just going to go in front of a light panel, it's going to help me, and I'm still using Listerine and fluoride, and I'm taking proton pump inhibitors, I'm not sure you're going to be able to do about it, right? And so, that's why I always think about things in context. It's not just about, going in front of a red light panel. I'm like, okay, great, you want to do that. Let's talk about, number one, why, and number two, let's talk about what you could do, like in combination with the red light to make it better, so you can see a better response overall.
Something I want to mention is that we always promote going outside. So
for sure,
go outside. We're not saying like just sit in front of a red light when you have really nice weather outside. Get your butt outside. That's going to be the most effective thing.
Always. Yeah.
But we sometimes on this show just refer to the red light just because it can be convenient.
Yeah, there's red light in the sunlight all throughout the day. More red light in the morning, more red light in the evening, but it's throughout the whole day. You get the whole spectrum. So the goal really is to get outside and get it more. But if you live in a place where you don't get a lot of sun, and it's really cold, you get a red light panel. It can be helpful in the wintertime. You can even get like a UVB, you can actually get like a sun lamp as well, which can be helpful to actually get your vitamin D exposure too, which is important. People don't get that from red light. You only get that from UVB.
Yeah, we've talked about that a bunch on the show before. There's vitamin D lamps. The company Spurdy.
Yep.
Vitamin D lamp, and then there's like a UVA, UVB combo lamp they have that if people are looking for that sort of thing. And then also EMR Tech has lights that have all of that stuff in one convenience thing. So that works out really well.
Yeah. Hey, quick aside, like you talked, it's been I don't know, we recently had a dentist on. I think you talked to him alone, right? So can you mention, what do you use for your toothpaste and mouthwash, if you use any of that? Because some people may have not even realized what you're talking about there.
Yes, that's a good point, because when I work with my patients, I do like a full assessment history, and I go through their house with them. We talk about their their bed sheets, how often they're changing their bed sheets. We talk about organic, non-organic stuff. We talk about
how often do you have to change your bed sheets?
It should be once a week. You should do once a week. Yeah, once a week. Not every day. Once a week's fine. Unless you have like a dust mite allergy, and then maybe you have to do it more often than that, because dust mites are like these small bugs that will live in space and not die. Yeah. But they're very hardy, but they build up if you don't wash your sheets usually every week is enough for most people.
Got it.
But I do like a full assessment. Let's take a look at their cupboards. Let's take a look at all their detergents, their water. Like so, and the big thing I find is what people are putting in their mouth, right? And so the scopes, the Listerines, those kinds of things. What they do is it's like taking an antibiotic and putting it on your mouth every day.
Yikes.
Because it's basically sterilizing your mouth cavity. Now, yes, it is killing bad bugs, but it's also killing the good ones too, right? And we talk about this with antibiotics, right? Like antibiotics kill all the bugs. They don't kill just the bugs that you want to kill. They kill them all. And you have to rebuild the whole system, right? So for me, I usually recommend, I have a couple of dentists that I work with pretty closely, other kinds of things that are going to be more supportive. So I think the other one I should mention that I try to get people not to do, I know it's so controversial, is fluoride as well. Fluoride is not a compound that should be in toothpaste or in water really at high levels, or really at any level really, because it is a toxin, okay? It is not something, it'll keep your teeth white, for sure, and it will kill bad bacteria, but also kills the good bacteria too. So again, it's like, I talked to my kids about it, like massaging the good bugs and killing the bad bugs. That's kind of what you want. So oil pulling is a big one, so you can use coconut oil. Coconut oil is good, it's an antiseptic, but it doesn't, kill everything. It just
rinse out your mouth with oil for approximately 2-3 minutes. Some people just do it as they're like doing stuff in the morning.
I typically do that. Like I take a spoonful in my mouth while I'm cooking breakfast for my kids, that kind of thing. Then you want to use a toothpaste that doesn't have fluoride, typically one that has hydroxyapatite in it, which is actually good mineralization for your bones in your teeth or bones, right? So that's like the main thing. And xylitol is good too because it's also got some antibacterial properties without being like bludgeoning. So we talk about that. We talk about deodorants as well being a big problem. People using the antiperspirants that have aluminum in it, for example, and other heavy metals. But a lot of the deodorants that don't make you sweat also have aluminum in it. And like there was a story I heard recently of a guy that had severe, it's called interstitial cystitis. It's like this severe urinary pain syndrome, where every time you just have constant abdominal pain, right? And then he was dealing with it for almost 10 years. And then he realized it was his deodorant. He stopped his deodorant and it went away in like a week.
It's so interesting you mentioned that, by the way, the aluminum deodorant, because Mark, you remember that Peter Attia clip you sent us? Dr. Peter Attia, I mean, not everyone is correct on everything, but he was talking to an interviewer and she's like, how about aluminum in deodorant? He's like, not something anyone needs to worry about. So again, it's just like, maybe these are things you might want to pay attention to.
Especially if you're compromised.
This is the thing. That's what I was going to say. Like, I have another friend of mine. She's a physician. She's like, she talks about it in a toxic load perspective, which I think is really important. And what I love about her analogy, her name's Jill Carnahan. She talks about like everybody's got a different size bucket toxic load. Some people have a very small bucket. And then as soon as it starts overflowing, you go off the cliff, right? Some people have a much larger bucket. This is like the guy that you saw that's smoked until he was 95 years old, no issues, died in his sleep when he was 100, right? Like that's a huge fucking bucket where he can just tolerate a huge amount of toxic load. Probably has a lot of great genes in his family where there was people that are living a very long period of time. Most people don't have those, right? Most of us have a toxic load that's, not a small bucket, but I mean, it's not that large. And then we have this one thing, then the next thing, right? So then it's not, so when Peter says, don't worry about aluminum deodorant, I'm like, actually, I disagree with that entirely because we're also toxic from all of our exposures on a regular basis. So that could be that aluminum deodorant that's actually the thing that tips you over to drop you down. And then all of a sudden you can't function the way you did before.
I mean, you're delivering it, into your body every day. You're wiping it in an area that is accepting of stuff transdermally very easily.
Yeah, so this is a field that it's kind of burgeoning. It's called exposomics. I don't know if you've heard it before, but the field of exposomics is the study of toxins in our environment and how it clinically affects us in various ways. So you can measure signs of toxicity in the body and understand there's environmental exposures, there's multiple different types of exposures from food, water, air, and everything else. And you can get a sense of people's toxic load looking at signs in their body of laboratory analysis of looking at not only the toxins themselves, but also signs of what we call oxidative stress in the system. So when the system's under significant amounts of inflammation, you can see this. Your antioxidants are low. Your gut is usually pretty toxic, and you have a leaky gut. Your hormones may be off the track, and so you can get a sense of what people's toxic load is by looking at some of these laboratory markers now and getting a sense. Okay, now let's see what we can address here. But the good news is that a lot of this is very addressable. You can just say, okay, you just change these for this, and then you're going to see a significant, decline. Like, one of the big killers of mitochondria these days is glyphosate, for example. Like glyphosate in Roundup, it is toxic to your mitochondria, right? And so you can actually measure people's glyphosate levels if you want. I don't do it anymore because it's always going to be high for the most part, especially people aren't feeling well.
Yeah.
And so my sense is, well, let's just optimize optimize your diet, your lifestyle, get you off of processed foods, get you off of these kinds of things at higher levels of glyphosate, and then optimize your antioxidant levels and things and work on your mitochondria. And then from there, then you get a better sense. Then you can see them significantly improve. That's what it comes down to. So we're all very toxic on some level. The question is, how much can we tolerate? And then unfortunately, a lot of us have these very small buckets that can't tolerate a lot. And then you get diseases, you get cancer, you get inflammatory bowel disease, you get an autoimmune problem, you get MS, you get, any of these other things that, because of that toxic load overload, right? And it's not like one size fits all. It's not like one thing is going to lead to, this is going to lead to X, Y, and Z. It's like everybody's going to be different. And that's why it's hard, because like all of a sudden I have a turbo cancer, right? Well, you didn't just all of a sudden have a turbo cancer, right? It might be growing fast, but because there's these conditions in the cell, in the body itself, that's allowing this stuff to happen, right? And this doesn't start day one and then day two you have a turbo cancer. Like this is something that happens long term.
Yeah.
What about the 5G and the Bluetooth?
Yeah, so the EMFs is a big one, right? So I mean, if you look at some of the graphs, I'm sure you guys have seen these over the years, like when the light bulb was invented, and then the rash or the rise of chronic diseases falls, in correlation almost directly. And there's actually a more recent study where I think it was like in the 1940s or 50s, where they electrified an island. They brought electricity to an island, and the same thing happened, right? Everything like disease rates like diabetes, cancer, super low. And then as soon as you bring in light, all that stuff goes super high, right? And so I think it's multifactorial. I think this is an interesting concept, going back to the energy stuff we started about in the beginning, like EMFs, okay? If somebody tells me that they're EMF sensitive, it's most likely not because they're EMF sensitive per se, unless they live in front of like a 5G tower or something crazy, or like they're like being bludgeoned by them. Usually it's because of mitochondrial dysfunction and toxic overload. And then if you can optimize them and get them more regulated on that level, then they're typically less sensitive to EMFs and 5G and things like that. Now, do I think that certain people have a higher sensitivity? I absolutely do. But I also think those are the people likely that have more mitochondrial dysfunction or have a higher risk of having mitochondrial dysfunction secondary to that toxic, bucket exposure, as I'd say. So it's funny. I was just down in Miami for a vacation with my family, and then on the beach, there's all these huge, high rises, and there's one in the middle. It's a big high rise. It's one person's house. Like the whole thing is his house, right?
Whoa.
And then it's like it goes from the beach all the way back. Like, it's huge, and he owns the whole thing. He owns the whole the block of where we were. And right behind his house is a 5G tower. And to do that, he would have had to have let them do that. And I'm like, karma, bitch. That's karma. Because you thought it was a good idea to put a 5G tower right behind your gazillion-dollar house.
Yeah.
That's on you,
Yeah.
I mean, so I think if you're living behind a 5G tower, that could be a problem for sure. But I think
some of this stuff with the 49ers, how you think that's pretty real? Have you seen any of that?
No, what's going on there?
I posted about it a couple times on my Instagram, and we've also had David Herrera here, who talks a lot about light and EMF and stuff.
Sure.
But the short of it is the 49ers are next to a substation, and the substation has a lot of electromagnetic fields pumping off of it, and it's something that the athletes have been sort of fearful of for several years. I think it started out as the athletes kind of joke about it, and they'd be like, oh, that giant substation is nuking us and so forth. But the 49ers have been consistently over the last several years been leading the league with injuries, and also leading the leagues with really horrific injuries such as Achilles tendons ruptures. I believe the average in the league, each team will have a couple of guys maybe rupture their tendon, but they had some other, exponentially worse effects. And some people are thinking that it might have something to do with some of this stuff because of what it can do to your collagen. And as David Herrera pointed out, it's kind of dehydrating the body, not dehydration like sweating necessarily, but dehydrating some of your tissues. And some of his solution to some of this was for them to be able to reverse this was to get sunlight every day and to drink deuterium depleted water. He felt that those are things that could help them sort of rehydrate, and obviously just trying to move away from that station, because the substation is like right there.
Yeah.
And it is all of this. That substation, I think, provides power to almost all of the Silicon Valley.
And to quickly add on to that, somebody went on and like apparently he like did measurements of the milligrams there, and apparently it was like 8.5 in the middle of the day for some points, and apparently the environmental EMFs or whatever like 0.5 to 3 at most.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
So I mean,
no, I mean I think there's something to it. I mean, again, it's not native to what we're supposed to be having on this planet as far as what we've been ever evolutionarily programmed to have as an environmental exposure. So I think you have to believe this stuff, and you have to think, well, what are you gonna do to mitigate it, right? And that's the hard part, because we don't really know. We don't have a lot of data on these kinds of mitigation strategies.
Yeah, my understanding, it's hard to mitigate because these EMF waves, my understanding, which is not a great one, but they mushroom cloud out. So it's not like you can be like, oh, we're going to build a wall.
Right. No, you can't do that.
Because a wall won't really do anything.
Yeah.
And you can't make a Faraday cage out of your whole practice facility. That's a horrible idea too.
Yeah.
Because then you could be nuking everybody
right. You can
with any other technologies that you have inside the cage. So
yeah, there's that. Yeah, Faraday cages are interesting for people that have EMF sensitivity when they went to sleep, especially. Like I do see, again, as I was talking about how EMF sensitivity, but if you live in a city, right, and you have like 30,000 routers like within a mile radius of you, that's a lot. I think it's a lot for everybody. So, and I think that this is a reason why you have people that feel like they do get sicker living in that kind of environment. I think that there's absolutely something there. And then Faraday cage is interesting, right? Like, I think it can work in sort of like a local environment, like around your bed, so that you're not, if you're not bringing anything that's EMF inside there. So I do have some of my patients that do use those, especially in cities, or just have them move out of a city.
Some of the beds have like curtains and stuff, right? Like you can kind of pull a curtain around and safeguard yourself.
Do you have EMF protecting underwear yet?
No, I haven't. I haven't gotten that crazy yet, but they're coming soon.
That's all over the place now, but it will go off if you go through the metal detectors in the airport, which is a pain in the ass. So, or a pain in the, well, depending on where you have the EMF exposure. So I have friends of mine that'll wear that stuff through the airport, but you get stopped everywhere because it's goes through metal detectors and doesn't. It'll pop off.
Set them off.
Set them off. Yeah.
So nowadays, because you were talking a little bit about psychedelics before this, anything new there for you in terms of civilian use?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about psychedelics is that we can talk about it so much more now in a more free way. And I think that's been, the biggest benefit over the last couple of years is that a lot of this stuff has been underground for so many years and being unregulated, which, has its pluses and its minuses in the sense that, you have to be very careful if you're looking for your local shaman across the street. And now where I live in Colorado, everything is from the ground is pretty much legalized, where like psilocybin is, DMT is, mescaline is, I think, one of them, peyote, I think is, I can't remember. There's one that's not because it's an endangered plant. But in general, like if you come to Colorado, you can go get psilocybin therapy now and do it legally. You don't charge the person that's giving you the ceremony or giving you the treatment. They don't charge you for the mushroom. They charge you for the therapy to watch you and make sure you're okay while you're taking it. So that's kind of like the legal hoop there. So it's come a long way, right? I think that's really good because we know that, in the mental health world, we don't have a lot of great options for people. And, if people are on, we talked about this before, but like depression is not a serotonin deficiency issue, right? We know that it's often a mitochondrial issue, right? But often there's a lot of psychosocial emotional things that are happening that have either been as a result of having, this depression for years, or it may have caused it in the beginning, right? If like a super stressful event, a traumatic hospitalization, somebody died, like bad things. And I see this time and time again. And the cool thing about psychedelics done in the correct way is that instead of taking years and years of therapy, it's like 2 or 3 sessions and you are transformed, right? And that's something that we just haven't seen in modern medicine, like really not in modern medicine, really. It goes back to shamanistic times and using it in ceremonies and understanding that, there's ways to use these things, not only, from a mental health perspective, they did use them that way, but they also use it as ways to kind of bring people out of childhood into adulthood. That's sort of like rites of passage kinds of ceremonies too, as ways to help people understand that there's more to the world than what you see, right? This is why, I think that's a big thing. And you've heard of like the stoned ape hypothesis, right? So the idea like, the apes were finding plants that were making them go psychedelic and like, oh, maybe we can use this for a tool, man. Like, maybe we can start talking now. Like, like that kind of idea. But because the cool thing about what psychedelics do is that they dampen down something called your default mode network.
The way that I use methylene blue is very similar to the way that you're using it. I don't use it every day. I think things that push that button to change your mood, you might want to be a little cautious with it. In my opinion, and the feelings that I get from methylene blue, it does change my mood a little bit. It's a mood enhancer. When I go out and run, I feel like I do have a little bit more endurance. I do feel like I can breathe a little bit better, but that could also be, I've been training very hard as well, so it could be an adaptation to that as well. But as we've had, David Herrera and many other people have come on the show before, they basically just say methylene blue is a electron donor, and it allows the body to utilize energy just more efficiently. And I don't know if I can feel that per se, but I know that I feel better when I'm running, when I'm using methylene blue.
Yeah, post sessions of grappling, that's when I usually use. I use it 2 or 3 times a week. Post sessions of jiu-jitsu, I always feel like I have more energy, like much more energy than I typically have, which makes me understand that, if I did want to go for longer sessions, I could, but it also helps me understand that I'm going to be recovering better for my next session the next day, which is a big deal. But yeah, I think that if you guys, first off, this stuff is great because it's third-party tested. Methylene blue, in other sources like the stuff that you'll see on Amazon or like random websites, there's no regulation. So a lot of people have levels of toxicity from the supplement because it's not dosed correctly. And there are other things in that methylene blue. Again, this is something that is lab made. It's not, you know what I mean? So you got to be careful. And this is why we like using this stuff, because we know it's not going to mess us up.
You can go on their website. You can go on the Transcriptions website and you can get a report of the third-party tested methylene blue and double, triple check it for yourself. In addition to that, they have the Canatine, which I have not used that much, but when I have used it pre-workout, I did notice I get a zip from it. I think it has nicotine in it, along with a couple other things to go along with the methylene blue. So do yourselves a favor, check out Transcriptions, check out what they got. Strength is never weakness, weakness never strength. Catch you guys later.
Yeah.
Your DMN, your default mode network, is a part of your brain that's sort of running in the background when you're not doing anything and like not performing a task. That's what's kind of happening, is your DMN is kind of running the show. Your DMN is like, hi, my name is Dr. Scott. I live in Colorado. I have these many kids. This is what I like. This is what I dislike. This is what I don't want to do. This is what I do want to do. Like, that's your default mode network. And when that kind of goes down, connections can be made that you wouldn't make otherwise because you're not getting in your own way. And like, this is the thing, we're all living in like these stories that we live for ourselves. Like, I'm Mark and I need to lift heavy, right? That's a story. Like, you don't have to, but you do, right? That's fine. They could be good stories, ones that are self-perpetuatingly in a positive way. But for many people, it's like, well, I'm just not good enough to do that, right? I can't, do this, right? If I don't eat for 3 hours, I'm going to die, right? Things like that. These are stories that we build up. And there's like some psychology around that too, that again, becomes self-perpetuating outside of even the story. And so what psychedelics can do under the right circumstances is like, make those stories go bye-bye, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, why did I believe that? Is that a necessary pattern? Oh, I can retrain that. And then the cool thing about the psychedelics is that, done in the correct way, is that it can regrow connections that can allow you to transform. Right?
Any specifically you're talking about right now? Because psychedelics is broad.
Yeah, it's broad. Yeah. So, I mean, the ones that are most studied right now would be something like ketamine, for example. Okay. Ketamine's a legal psychedelic. It can be used both either orally as a troche. It can be used IV as well.
Troche ketamine.
Yes, there's troche ketamine too. Yes, there's home ketamine companies that will give you home troches to use and like watch you on. This happened actually during the pandemic. There was a bunch of companies that came around that would do remote ketamine therapy with you. They would send troches to your house, and then you put the troche in, and then you'd have them on the video, while you're going through your ketamine journey. So, so you can use it that way. IV ketamine, of course. The challenge with it is that there's a lot of people that, as a result of understanding that ketamine had very significant potential, just put up their shingle and said, come here and get ketamine. And they would give people IV ketamine, and still do, without any therapy before, during, or after. Yeah. And that doesn't lend well to have any kind of really significant transformation. But the cool thing about ketamine is that it helps with creating new dendrites, so new connections to other neurons. And in the window of doing that is within about 12 hours of your experience. And so you have this really beautiful window where you can really optimize your brain in various ways. You can actually retrain your brain in that window it's sort of like opening up what we call these sort of critical windows where you have this huge capacity to change your brain in a positive or in a negative way. You have to be very aware of that, right? So if you're doing ketamine and then you're watching porn, like that's not a good idea, right? And I had somebody, a similar story to that, came and, had that kind of experience, and then he was really in a bad place, right? Really in a bad place. And so, the way I think about the major psychedelics now that have done a decent amount of research, ketamine for sure. MDMA, even though it wasn't reclassified as a legal substance yet, does have some really good data, especially for PTSD. A lot of great data, especially for soldiers and people that have, that a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder. Psilocybin's got some newer studies as well on treatment-resistant depression. Okay. That's come out recently as well. So those are the three. I mean, LSD actually also has a couple new studies that have come out recently, also looking at depression and looking at OCD as well. So I think that there's a whole spectrum of them that are on board, and there's a bunch of companies that are making drugs that are based on these psychedelics. And the question has always been synthetics, yeah. Oh. And then the question has always been, can you take the psychedelic experience out of the experience and still give them the positive benefit of having the transition and transformation? That really hasn't quite been figured out. There was like one company that was working, I think, relatively close, and look at something for treatment-resistant depression that didn't cause a psychedelic experience. But what's the fun in that, right? So anyway.
I don't know if you saw that documentary recently. There was one that was on ibogaine.
Yeah,
It had the military people wore something like, I can't remember the name of the...
Ibogaine's a very interesting
but anyway, they used ibogaine, and I think the psychedelic effect of it is that people were going in, these soldiers, these veterans, were going in to these circumstances thinking like, oh crap, I got to deal with this. And they knew for sure what they were going to deal with. And they knew it was going to be this incident that happened in the military.
Sure.
And none of their trauma, I shouldn't say none of their trauma, the main root of their trauma in all the cases that they had, which was like 6 guys, so that's not like a huge case study, but it was like 6 guys. None of it had anything to do with the military. It was all from their childhood.
Really?
And each guy faced something different. Well, one guy faced his dad. Another guy faced himself. And he just was staring back at himself as if he said it was like somebody staring at you like they want to fight you.
Yeah.
And it was just, and he said he thought that he didn't know how long it lasted. But he thought he was like looking at himself for like 4 hours straight.
Yeah.
Just mean mugging himself,
Yeah.
And then out of that experience, he was able to like, probably get some help and interpret some of the meaning behind it. And it just really helped him though, kind of bring down those walls that you're kind of talking about too.
Yes. I mean, ibogaine it's called like the stern grandfather thing, which is like, it basically, the way it's been communicated to me is that like somebody is talking to you in a stern voice for 24 hours straight about what you've done wrong, what you need to do differently, and being able to sort of reprogram you neurologically. And that's why it's so potentially impactful for addiction. And that's one of the main ways it's being looked at as well, not only with PTSD, but for people that have severe addictions. But it's not without its potential risk. Ibogaine specifically does have a cardiotoxicity, a cardiovascular toxicity potential. So there's iboga, which is the plant, and ibogaine, which is the actual compound itself. Iboga itself as a plant ceremony is pretty safe. You don't have to have like a medical technician that's like monitoring your heart rate the whole time. But ibogaine, you typically have like an EKG going the whole time to make sure you're not going into arrhythmias, like into abnormal rhythms. So you have to be careful. You have to be safe. And the thing about it is if you're already like addicted to, drugs and you're going down there, you'd be already nutritionally depleted and things like that, which can be very, very difficult. The way I think about psychedelics these days is like, is more like psychedelics for health optimization. And in the sense of how can it be a tool you use to optimize your health and foundationally support you over the long term, right? And that could be any number of things, but really kind of helping with that sympathetic activation, that activated fight or flight that happens all the time in people. Like that's where psychedelics can come in and be very, very impactful. Because I'm like, look, you had trauma when you were a kid. Nothing's going to change until you address that. You can go to therapy for 20 years, or you can go to my friend who runs a fantastic, beautiful ketamine clinic and do integration before, during, and after. Come to see me in 3 months, and we'll see if you still need to optimize your health as much as you did. Everything's gonna be much easier. I promise, right? Because then all of a sudden the system is like, okay, it's relaxed. Now it can actually heal. It can detox. It can actually rest and recover. And so the way I think about psychedelics a lot is typically that way. I don't like to think about it only as its own bucket, because oftentimes that's not enough for people just to, work on their trauma, which I think is important, and it could be big trauma, big T's and little T's, and, multiple little T's over. I mean, all that stuff is true. And the body does keep the score in the sense that, the body does sort of create these ways of manifesting your stress. Is it back pain? Is it headaches? Is it, chronic injuries that don't get better? Like, you guys have seen the books and you've read about it, I'm sure. Like, back pain, I think it's like 80% of it has nothing to do with structure anymore, right? There might be the acute back pain that causes a structural issue. Not to say like, the 5 or 10 years that led up to whatever caused the back issue, but getting better from back pain is 80% mental and not physical, right? And that's because of the sort of that body keeping the score aspect of things. So I think that's where psychedelics really going to fall in a lot more, where it's just like, okay, now if you really want to optimize your health, longevity, health span, you want to have this kind of perspective and you want to be able to downregulate your nervous system at the same time. And the perspective is a big one. And I think I want to mention that too, is that if you can realize that there is more to life than what's going up in your brain at every moment, right? You have on average around 70,000 thoughts every single day. Like, do you believe everything you think, right? You shouldn't believe everything you think. You shouldn't believe most of the things you think. I mean, almost anything, right? Your mind is crazy. Our minds are all crazy, thinking crazy things, right? You're driving and like, all of a sudden, would it be great if I just turned off and just threw myself off the bridge? Like, you think about those things, right? And then one thought leads to the next thought, leads to the next and next. And you don't even remember like that first thought you had, like, why am I even on this train of thinking that I'm going to go tip cows or whatever, right? Like, you got there somehow, right? And so what psychedelics can do is allow you some distance from your thoughts. Then all of a sudden, it's like meditation's the same thing. Meditation is something you can do on a regular basis, but psychedelics can help you understand where that place is.
Yeah.
If you have a little bit of distance, then like, oh yeah, those crazy thoughts again. There's just like, that's just like brain zaps. Like, it's just happening in my brain. It's not me. Like, if you can observe those thoughts at the same time as having them, are you those thoughts? That's the question.
Now, since we're on this topic, marijuana is something that is like super casually used now, from young kids to older individuals. And I don't know if you've been paying any attention to that side of things, but are there more things you think people maybe should be careful of when it comes to marijuana use, or are there any potential positives that are coming out of marijuana use?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think the short story is that if you're young, THC isn't a good idea. Like, especially if you're like under 18 or over, even younger than 25. Even with psychedelics in general, if you talk to most experts, most will tell you that you really shouldn't be messing around with those things until you're after about 25, 26 years of age.
I know two people who have had schizophrenic breaks at this point before 25 because of marijuana. So
exactly,
just be careful, youngins.
Yeah, because the brain doesn't fully form. It's not fully matured until about 25, 26 years of age. So if you close your eyes and think about how you feel, most people are like, yeah, I feel about the same as I did when I was about that age, because that's when your brain's like fully myelinated, fully all the coverings of all your neurons are all myelinated, so all your firing's at full cylinder. Yeah. You still can make new brain connections, all that kind of thing, but in general, you shouldn't be messing around with most of these things before that age in general. I think what it comes down to with THC, my big thing is I don't think anybody should be smoking anything. Number one, I think just because it's too fast to get into the system, you're also burning a bunch of stuff to get into the lungs, even if you're vaporizing and not actually smoking weed itself. It's like, that's my first thing, is like, I don't think anybody should be smoking anything. I think that THC on its own, there is some risk, I think, with brain function over time, especially if it's not being well balanced with some of the other cannabinoids. So if it's more of a balanced kind of thing where you have CBD, you have some of the other non-psychoactive cannabinoids, I think it'd be better. But like, you go to the store now, you can get like 100 milligrams of THC vaporizing whatever. And I'm like, that's just not a good idea. I think that I like some of the other cannabinoids a little bit better, like the ones that are not THC. THC actually, it actually what's called antagonizes or actually blocks the GABA receptor, which can give people anxiety. Certainly it depends on the strain and all that kind of stuff. But the strains, why it doesn't cause that in some people is because it has other cannabinoids in there that are non-psychoactive. So I'm more aligned with the non-psychoactive cannabinoids overall. I think THC itself, if it's going to be used, it needs to be balanced with some of the non-psychoactives as well, and like more of the balanced formulas to be more supportive of the brain. There are some exceptions. I mean, there are some people that have looked at like high dose THC for cancer, for example, which are interesting to me, some of the cancer pathways. I don't know a lot about that literature, but I do have some friends that will prescribe high dose THC in people that have certain types of cancer and have seen benefit over the years. So, but I couldn't tell you the mechanisms there. But in general, I think some people love the performance enhancing aspects of THC, and I think that's fine. But it's not one of my favorites because I think it's not really a psychedelic in the way that I think we're talking about here. It's not like a therapeutic one that from a way to kind of improve your cognitive capacity and health optimization. I don't think for most people, but I think there are exceptions. I do have a friend of mine that uses it before he works out, because it relaxes him and he actually works out better that way. And that's great. So I think if it's calming down your nervous system, I think that's a positive. You have to be careful about your THC and your non-psychoactive cannabinoid balance. I think it's a big thing.
I think it's pretty big amongst gamers. Like it's a PED for video games, I think.
I think it's because it does increase creativity a little bit, right? Because it does have that capacity of decreasing your default mode network, just like we're talking about. But again, there are much better psychedelics out there, I think, and much better compounds in general to help with the brain. I think that the non-psychoactive ones, like your CBD, I know it's been around forever. I think it's fantastic. There's really great data on CBD as being an anxiolytic, so it decreases anxiety. It helps decrease inflammation in the brain, makes you feel better. CBG is also great as well. Cannabigerol, that has some really good data. And there's CBN, which is also something that can be helpful for sleep as well. So I think that I'm a big fan of the non-psychoactives in general.
Have you seen some of the stuff that Brian Johnson's been doing with mushrooms? He's been testing them regularly, and I don't know, it's interesting. I don't know exactly what his exact
goal
is.
He's doing hero doses,
trying not to die or whatever, but
he's doing hero doses of mushrooms, 5 grams or above. So they call it heroic dose because classically for about 5 grams of mushrooms, you no longer think that you no longer understand there's a reality anymore. Basically, you disintegrate into dust in some way. And
Yep.
So
that happens.
So below that, it's typically more emotional mushrooms, but above 5 grams, the classic story is a guy named Paul Stamets, who you guys probably have heard. He talks about how he had a stuttering problem when he was a kid, and then he took like 25 grams of mushrooms by accident, and he was in a lightning storm, and he stopped stuttering. After that, he never stuttered again. And so, that's like the classic
25 grams.
Yeah. He didn't know how much he was taking at
You
the
ever
time.
see that video of Mike Tyson just rifling down, stuffing his face with mushrooms? It's so great.
Yeah.
And the people, he's on somebody's podcast and they're like, aren't you going to use any water? And he's like, he's just scarfing.
He's just trying.
It's so great. He's like, nah. He's like, you want to get the full effect of it or something, he's saying.
I'll tell you a really truncated, very short story. Sam went out of town one weekend. I was alone with my dogs. I remembered Mike Tyson did it, and I was feeling really courageous last year. So I did the same thing because I had a lot of mushrooms, and it was definitely around I'm pretty sure it was 9 to 12.
By yourself?
By myself.
Okay, not a good idea.
Very quickly, I realized I had to crate my dogs and go upstairs, and I thought I broke my shit for hours. I was like, I'm going to be in a mental I was messed.
Yeah, that can happen. That can happen.
But luckily, I wasn't. Had some nice discoveries, but don't do it. Don't do it. You
have to do it with somebody that's going to be watching you. That kind of dosing is not for the faint of heart. It's not something you can do on your own.
Let's check this out.
Yeah, man.
See if we can get some audio going.
He's just doing it.
Put it on a peanut butter sandwich. It mixes together. You know what I'm saying? But Mike wants all those little particles stuck in his teeth. You'll be digging a gram out for the next couple hours, trying to figure out, there's some stuck in the back there somewhere.
He used to do drugs.
Yep. Yeah, he goes, no shit.
Oh, shit. Bro, did you see the look on Mike's eyes? He's like, yeah, man. He's like, I'll pick your teeth. And it was like, relax, Mike.
When I first heard about mushrooms in LA, everyone would talk about the taste. They said they tasted like shit.
This shit.
Yeah,
They
you
come
shit.
from
But
shit.
hey, literally, you have to grow them in manure.
Correct.
So you're accurate.
Yeah, but you're.
I love that
just
Mike Tyson
completely
is so
over it.
smart.
Are you even gonna drink the Fiji?
Yeah, I'm always just so careful with people these days because everybody asks me should I do psilocybin? Should I do LSD? Should I do blah? I'm like, look, number one, is it legal where you live? And be careful because you can still go to jail in some places. If you it's in Alabama or something like that, you could go to jail with certain things. So you have to be careful.
So run across the border.
Yeah. Well, yeah. The second thing is to find people you trust that are going to be there to help because it's a set and setting thing. You have to make sure the people there are going to be there to support you and that you're not doing 9 grams on your own. That is a bad idea.
I was sure I had schizophrenia with
I can imagine. I can imagine.
I was certain.
Yeah. And then in the end, what is your goal with all of this? Is it you're exploring? That's okay. I totally understand that. But lower doses, microdosing it, getting understanding of how you feel. That's usually a better way for people to get started, especially if they're coming from a more stressful place. That's typically a nice way to kind of get them going and okay, this is how it's going to feel. And but everybody's very individualized, right? You want to make sure that you're the problem now, like anything, like once again, something becomes popular, everybody wants to do it, and it's not very regulated. You know what you're getting and the stuff that you're getting, and and if it's like LSD, for example, that's a synthetic, right? Like if you take a little bit of the wrong dose, you could go from like having a very good experience to be like 12 hours, because LSD is about 11 or 12 hours of a trip. Like that's a long day. That's a long day with the dose you weren't expecting. So I talk about this all the time with my patients. I'm like, look, my goal is to optimize your health. We want to do this by optimizing, your lifestyle, your diet, your vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and cofactors. This could be a big part for you if we can find you the right set and setting to do it in, and you feel comfortable, right? And you have the right support. If you're female, you should have a female guide. If you're a male, you should have a male guide most of the time, right? And sometimes, like with the studies, what they did, they actually had a male and female guide with the patient in the room together, so that there wasn't any issues with that male female, because when you're in those states, you're also much more vulnerable, obviously, right? And so you have to obviously trust the people that are going to be around you, that they're not going to, do anything that's going to be harmful to you while you're doing it. So like, good thing you created your dogs just in case, right? Yeah. But I mean, I think it's a bigger conversation about like, we all want to feel better. We all want to feel like we're not stuck in these ruts all the time. And psychedelics can certainly help, because it downregulates that default mode network in a way that you can create new pathways. You can create new stories. You can learn how, I'm a big fan of meditation. Mm-hmm. If you learn where where you have a little bit of distance from your thoughts, you're like, oh, all this is just games that I'm playing in my head. Yeah. Then you learn how to meditate. Like you can do the same thing on a day-to-day basis. Think about psychedelics as like peak experiences, right? You can't have a peak experience every single day. Like it just doesn't go well, right? And so you want to have things that you can do every single day to maintain your capacity. And then you have these peak experiences, and instead of coming back to the same baseline, you come up a little bit higher. Like, oh, now I have a better sense of who I am and what my likes and dislikes, and how I can create some distance from my thoughts. And then that's where meditation can come in. And you can use molecules that are maybe not psychoactive to help you to focus your meditation, or help you with more energy, or, help you calm down, and all those things kind of play into it. But the key is like peak experience. You got to come back down, everybody. Like how are you going to come back down, and what are you going to do from there? Like that's the integration piece that's so key.
Have you found food or other supplements tend to work really well with your company transcriptions and some of the different products you have? Because I'm imagining that you have like potions and powders and all kinds of different things going on, and you make great combinations of stuff already. Sure. But I'm sure like there's probably some combinations that we're maybe not hearing enough about. Maybe some particular amino acid that you take with some of these things to help amplify. What are some of those things, if there are any?
Yeah, so one of my favorite combinations, actually, it's super simple, is using our Trocom. So Trocom is a combination of GABA, something called nicotinyl GABA, vitamin B3 attached to the GABA, kava, CBD, and CBG. And so nicotinyl GABA is pretty cool. It's a vitamin B3 attached. And so GABA itself is too big of a molecule to get into the brain. So if you take GABA supplements and they work for you, it's usually because you have a leaky brain. Means you have a leaky gut, means the blood-brain barrier is not doing what it's supposed to do. You got to optimize that. I've worked with patients over the years where GABA supplements were working. We optimized their gut. GABA supplements stop working. And that's what's supposed to happen. Okay, so B3 has a transporter that gets across. So you get some B3 in the brain, some GABA. B3 is mildly activating because it's niacin. So you get like mild activation, but not a huge amount. You just don't feel as tired, which is good. But you have the anxiety relief. Then you have the kava, CBD, and CBG in there. And what's really nice about that is it's a great combination for meditation. It's a great combination for just winding down the nervous system. So if I want to meditate, if I'm sort of hyper elevated from the day, need to take a break and to bring myself down quickly at the end of the day, then I take some Trocom and I do a meditation, right? I'll do a meditation, either a guided meditation, or I'll just do one with music or whatever. And that's a nice combination for me to use in just kind of winding down throughout the day. So some Trocom with some meditations, a great combination. I also use our methylene blue a lot as well. And that's for a different reason. So we think that, when our mind is relaxed, when we're relaxed, that our brain function is relaxed too. But no, actually, like a good example of this is when we're sleeping, REM sleep is actually very, very active. Like our brain's hypermetabolic. And so if we don't have good metabolic function of our brain, we also can't think very well either. We can't regulate our nervous system very well either. So using some methylene blue could be very helpful at regulating the mitochondria to help regulate your nervous system better. So I find that in patients where their nervous system is kind of up and down a lot, it's not so much actually giving them anxiety relief all the time, it's actually improving their mitochondrial function. And so it's one of those things where it's kind of a balance where people come to see me like, doc, I need more stimulants. I can't focus. I'm like, actually what you need to do is calm the fuck down. And then when we calm you down, you're going to feel better. And other people, it's like, well, doc, I can't focus any more stimulants. And actually it's because their mitochondria are just trashed and they actually do need more support. They don't need more stimulants. They just need more support so their mitochondria work better. And so they have more capacity, right? And so for me, like I'll take some methylene, like if I have a long day with work, with calls, with whatever, I'll take some methylene blue in the morning. And then in about 30 minutes later, I'll go in front of my red light panel or I'll go outside because red light and methylene blue combine really well together. And then that combination, that stimulation, that support gets me through much longer. So I'll look through at the end of my day, be like, oh, I didn't get tired. I didn't, react when my kids came home and they said they needed something when I was in the middle of a podcast or whatever, right? Like I was more calm, more focused throughout the day. And then I also like to combine methylene blue with hyperbaric oxygen therapy as well, actually, because methylene blue, I have a soft chamber at my house and methylene blue is great because it supports that mitochondria. And then you're in a hyperbaric chamber, you're increasing the amount of oxygen in the circulation, which requires you to be able to actually tolerate that. Having more oxygen, need more energy, make more reactive oxygen stress. And so you have the methylene blue on board that supports that. So it's a nice combination as well. I use it pre-exercise and then you asked about supplements in addition. I think I didn't mention that. So what I really think is important to remember with methylene blue is that you're revving up metabolism, right? So you also want to think about giving, cofactors that can help with metabolism at the same time. I use a lot of methylene blue plus creatine actually in the morning. Personally, I do it. And I also have a lot of my patients that I do because that combination seems to be a great stack for the brain, especially.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were natural until you said creatine. Now that changes everything.
Sorry. Did I say the wrong word?
Creatine person? Or?
No, low doses. Low doses. Yeah.
Yeah. Some people are saying that it can help with people that might not have a good night of sleep and stuff like that.
Yeah. There was a study that looked about, I think it was around 20 grams of creatine post evening of getting bad sleep and having better cognitive capacity the next day. I'm more of a fan of it. I think that lower doses, like 3 to 5 grams of it, as a way to help with energy reserve and also methylation support. So we talk about your B vitamins and things like that. And people talk about like methylated B vitamins. What creatine does, it's like a secondary pathway, but it's a pathway that can recycle what's called your methyl donors. And as a result of that, you can maintain your B vitamins in an active state for longer if you have the creatine on board. And so I'm using it more from that purpose, not from a muscle building. And we talk about, having more, creatine gives you more capacity from a muscle perspective as well. That may be true, but what I'm looking at more is like from a brain health perspective mostly. And also just, from more from a cognitive capacity. Yeah. And the methylation side.
What style of diet do you tend to kind of side with for yourself or even for your clients?
If I'm going to side with anything, typically the main things I tell my patients is, get rid of processed food, get rid of refined sugar. And then if you've never tried to be off of gluten and dairy for 3 months, give it a try. Because most people do have a sensitivity to either one or both of those foods, even if they don't think they do. Even if, you grew up on a farm and you've been drinking milk. You probably don't, but most of us aren't like that. And so most of us don't have a natural capacity to, and I saw this when I was a kid. My father's a chiropractor for 45 years. And he would, in the 1980s, he was taking people off of dairy and their allergies and their asthma and their pain was going away. And I was like, well, there's something obviously going on here, right? So I think that's my first step with most people is like, let's talk about those things, processed foods, refined sugar, and then, think about, gluten and dairy. But in general, I tend to be more on the lower carbohydrate side, higher protein, moderate fat side of things. Because I find that most people, you don't need to be eating a shit ton of carbohydrates unless you're doing a lot of activity on a regular basis is what it comes down to. If you're doing a lot of activity on a regular basis, you can absolutely eat carbohydrates. That's no problem, right? It also depends on kind of where you are in your life cycle. Like if you're going through puberty, you need a lot more carbohydrates in general than you do when you're 65 years old, right? And you also need more protein as you get older as well. In fact, like some of the new guidelines, you have to be careful. Kids don't need as much protein as adults do, actually, because kids can utilize their protein at a much higher capacity than we can as an adult. So like, if my kid has 8 grams, it's like me having 25, right? So you have to, like, your kid doesn't need to have as big a steak as you do, okay, everybody? So like, just be aware of that, right? Because they can utilize a lot more of that protein. But as we get older, we do risk, having, significant amounts of muscle loss. And that's what something called sarcopenia, right? And if you have less muscle mass over time, you have a high risk of fractures, high risk of, falling and injuring yourself and things like that. And so I'm a big fan of making sure your protein's high enough as well. So I think overall my strategy is relatively low carb, relatively higher on the protein side, especially as you get older, and then moderate on the fat. And then usually on the fat side, I'm not talking about like, full fat butter coffee every day and like full fat coconut oil every day. I'm talking about like, good fats, unsaturated fat, saturated fat and unsaturated fat are good. Typically lean meats in general for most people. That's kind of the thing. I think, for a while it was the keto, everything fat all the time. And now it's sort of like everything protein all the time. Even your Starbucks now can have protein foam in it and crazy things like that. So I don't think we want to go that way.
I haven't tried that yet. Either one of you guys try that?
I haven't tried it yet. I know that came out this year or recently, right? I get like everything else. Everything it gets commoditized over time, right? The goal really for me is like measure what you need. Look at your cells. Look at what's going on. Are you optimized with vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and cofactors? Are your mitochondria working well? If they're not, well, we got to change things up, right? The other thing that's important here is that you'll hear doctors and people say like, you know what, my diet's so good, I just get all my nutrients from what I eat. And I go, bullshit, because it's almost impossible, because the amount of nutrient density that we have in our food now is like 70% less than it was 80 or 90 years ago, which you guys already know, right? And so if you're trying to get your food trying to get your nutrients just from your food, you're not going to be able to do it unless maybe, you're eating liver 5 days a week. And that's also going to become problematic from the iron exposure and things like that. And so I also like to have people recognize these meat suits that we wear, they weren't supposed to be around for more than about 45 years. Or, there was always supposed to be some people that lived longer so they could pass down generational knowledge and things like that.
Are you saying you don't believe the Bible? Never mind. You don't need to answer that. But there's people that are pretty old in that book.
Yeah, like how old is Abraham? Like he's like 1,000 years old or something like that, right? So,
or what about Star Wars? Yoda, he was pretty old.
Yeah, I guess if you lived in Yoda's, I don't know.
900 something years old.
Yeah, something like that. So yes, I think for me, it's like you have to realize that we are a make and model that wasn't supposed to be around for more than a certain amount of time. So if you want to keep it optimized after that, you have to be thinking about taking supplements, getting on hormones maybe, optimizing nutrition in different ways than you would have when you were younger.
Awesome. Where can people find you? Where can they get some prescriptions?
Well, yeah, thanks for having me, guys. This has been fun.
Yeah,
appreciate it.
We had a pretty long-winded conversation this time. Light, water, magnetism.
Something else in there.
Protein. Psychedelics. Well, again, thank you guys for listening. So my name is Dr. Scott Sherr. You can find me on my website. It's drscottsherr.com. My name, DRSCOTTSHERR.com. And then my company, Transcriptions, is a fantastic company. We have lots of products. Methylene Blue, talked about Trocom today, which is a fantastic one to downregulate the nervous system. Something called Troz and Tromune. I know you guys like Tromune. It's great for immune system activation. You take it at night. You can check it out at transcriptions.com.
Take it every time I go to the airport before.
Yeah. Yes, it's a great pre-travel. Like if you feel like you're getting sick, like take it immediately when you feel like you're getting sick. Or if you're like around a lot of people that are, like an airplane or something like that, take it while you're traveling. And believe me, it's like night and day. My kids,
the person that's sneezing always sits right next to you.
Yeah, that's just how it goes. Yeah. And then yes, you can check it out at transcriptions.com, at Dr. Scott Sherr on Instagram at Transcriptions. We have a nonprofit called Health Optimization Medicine and Practice. You can check it out at homehope.org.
Strength is never weakness. Weakness never strength. Catch you guys later. Bye.